the people they thought were wicked, that's Islam, abroad. So Columbus's timing was flawless. Isabella was ill at the time, so he eventually ended up signing the contract with Ferdinand to go to the Americas. As I say, he was going to the Americas as Viceroy.
And what does that mean, though, in terms of his role? What does that translate as? What does Viceroy mean?
He was ruling he was to rule America on behalf of Spain. And they were very legalistic in those days. They laid out all sorts of provisions about how he should behave. And they were very concerned for the native people. They should be treated fairly and honorably. And so Columbus had a whole raft of instructions how he was to govern and behave, which he breached. And so, as you know, he was recalled as Viceroy for breach of his duties. And he died basically a poor man without recognition. And then there was a huge lawsuit that went on for nearly 100 years between Columbus descendants, trying to claim back the titles and so on that he was granted before his disgrace.
Were people mad at you when you published this book, 1421?
I think, funny enough, I had a pretty easy ride, far easier than I thought. I mean, the thing that terrified me was if I had made some obvious howling mistake, I'd said they visited a port, which was 2,000 feet up a mountain or something. But fortunately, there weren't any howlers like that. And I could always go back to my central plank, which was that none of the European famous explorers actually discovered anything, because they all knew where they were going, because they all, by their own admission, had maps. So nobody could explain that. So in a way, it was quite easy. There was quite a lot of contention when I argued in my second book that Leonardo, although he was a brilliant genius and a wonderful artist and superb draftsman, he basically was not an inventor. He improved on the work of others. Virtually every drawing of a machine that he made, he improved on an existing drawing, which he had a book of drawings of all these different machines. And he got that book of drawings from an Italian, who got it from another Italian, who got it from the Chinese. So that created a lot of upset. People were very, very upset about what they thought was my attack on Leonardo, which wasn't an attack at all, because I kept saying what a brilliant genius he was. But that was, of course, a lot of upset.
You say that the Chinese were centuries ahead of Europe, and that really the Europeans were standing on the shoulders of giants, in effect.
That's correct, yeah.
You say kind of 5 centuries ahead of Europe. That's huge.
Yes, it is. But it's true.
The Emperor of China, that is the whole first 100 pages of the book that you talk about, is it Xu Di?
Xu Di, yeah.
Xu Di, who commissioned 1,681 new ships.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, it's, as you say, it's absolutely phenomenal undertaking, but he did. He built, 7 shipyards, and some of them were the most enormous docks, and he commissioned this huge fleet of getting on for 2,000 ships. Now, he did this at the same time as he built the Forbidden City and repaired the Great Wall and built the Temple of Heaven. And in fact, what happened was that China was denuded of trees. So he sent a eunuch army into Vietnam to pillage the trees in northern Vietnam for China. This led to a war, which the Vietnamese were very ably represented and led. And it tied down huge armies, Chinese armies in the jungle. So China had her Vietnam 600 years before America. And in fact, that's what brought Xu Di down, because the war in Vietnam sapped China's energy and strength, just about bankrupted the country. And Xu Di's ministers resigned or committed suicide or were sacked, and the whole government fell apart in the summer of 1421. And really, that was the end of the party for Xu Di.
You talk heavily about the critical importance of astronavigation and how extraordinarily important and critical it was that the Chinese understood and had full access to astronavigation that nobody else did. Explain that to the public, because I found that to be important.
Well, you've got to know, to make maps of the world, you've got to know where you are at any particular ship. The captain's got to know where he is so that he can draw an accurate map. If he didn't know where he was, all the captains would come home with drawings of distant lands, but they'd all be just a hopeless, incoherent jumble. So you can't start drawing world maps until you can accurately determine your position in the ocean. Now, the ocean, of course, has no signposts, so you've got to find a way of knowing where you are. And the only way you can do that is by using astronavigation, that is by using objects in the heavens, either the moon, the sun, stars, planets, or whatever. Now, there are some very simple ways that you can work out your position north or south of the equator and your position east or west of it. Now, starting with your position north or south of the equator, at the extension of the Earth's axis, billions of miles away in space, there's a star currently called Polaris. If you're at the North Pole, Polaris is right above you, 90 degrees elevation, so you look right up above your head, there is Polaris. Because it's so far away, that same star is on the horizon if you're on the equator. So by measuring the height of that particular star in the sky, you know how far north or south of the equator you are. So that's very important and very useful. The second point is longitude. How far are you east or west? And this you can do by describing or seeing an object in the heavens at the same time across the world. For example, if the moon eclipses, and the observer in Beijing notes it eclipsed at midnight, whereas the observer in the Indian Ocean noticed it eclipsed 6 hours later, then you can say, because 6 hours is 1/4 of 24 hours, that you are a quarter of the world away from the observer in Beijing, or 90 degrees away. So eclipse of the moon will enable you to determine longitude without using clocks. So by using Polaris and by using eclipses of the moon, a navigator could see where he was on the Earth's surface, and similarly could determine, when he came to new land, how far east of Beijing, or how far west of Beijing, how far north or south of Beijing he was. And that's really, in a nutshell, how they did it.
Hasn't this been going on for 2,000 years, that the Chinese have been recording events in the night sky?
It has indeed. Now, this is a rather interesting illustration of what you've been describing. The Chinese have been charting the stars in the sky every night for 2,000 years, as you say, and they have noted the exact positions of 1,450 stars when they rise and when they set, and where the moon is when they're rising and setting, and so on. So
that's huge.
It is. It's absolutely massive. But friends of our website have brought information to me, which is completely rivetingly interesting. Was that the Babylonians could, in fact, make those same measurements in 1800 BC. So the Babylonians, in fact, were 1,800 years ahead of the Chinese, and they could draw up star tables, planet tables, lunar tables, sun tables, and so on. So they could actually calculate longitude and latitude 3,800 years ago.
Amazing.
It is. It's just astounding. Terribly interesting.
And I bet it goes on, too.
It does. Oh, absolutely.
It's like a rabbit hole of exploration and discovery where everything is up to be looked at and renewed in a totally new way. Absolutely.
And sure as anything, someone will come along and say, well, before the Babylonians in 9,000 BC, there was XYZ could do it. I'm sure of that.
What is this huge encyclopedia project that you talk about on page 62 of 1421, the year